Hello everyone and welcome back to DC Central, and in today's video we'll be going over and breaking down and reviewing Arrow Season 8 Episode 7, otherwise entitled Purgatory, and if you have not seen this episode be sure to go do so before proceeding with this review, as it will be filled with spoilers. So this episode was really something unique and special because this is kind of the final traditional Arrow episode, if you will. Obviously the next episode is Crisis, the episode after that is the Backdoor Pilot, and the episode after that is of course the series finale, which is its own beast entirely. So really this episode was the last episode of Arrow that we are traditionally used to. So with that, I kind of judged this episode in an entirely different light than I have the rest of the season, because it really felt like this was a finale in its own right. So of course this episode took place on Lian, which is of course the island that Oliver was stuck on during his 5 years in hell, or well, 3 years in hell I guess you could say, as far as the island is concerned. For me, Lian was the perfect setting for this episode, as it took the series back to where it all began. It felt appropriate for this final traditional episode of Arrow to take place in Purgatory, because it just seems like a perfect idea. You know, this whole series really felt like it came full circle with this episode. Again, if you're looking at this episode in the view of almost like a finale, like a series finale, this really brought it all full circle, because we had all the characters from the show of today going back to where it all began, which was of course the island. Without the island, without Oliver being stranded on the island, he would have never become the Green Arrow. And it's really interesting that the show was able to take us back to the island for this final episode, and also to bring the kids to the island and show them what it was like and what the island was like. It was really great. And again, we always love returning to Lian. Lian is such a great setting, it's so synonymous with the show. To bring it back for this final traditional episode really worked well for this episode. And being back on Lian, this led to us seeing a lot of really awesome returning characters, a lot of really refreshing returning characters, to be honest. Characters like Edward Fires, who is of course the sort of season 1 flashback villain. Having him come back was really interesting. Like, I'm kind of amazed they managed to get him back. Like, he's such like almost an inconsequential character in a way, or one that fans don't really remember very much. It was really awesome to get him back, and of course we have Billy Wintergreen along with him, who was kind of like the OG Deathstroke on the show. It was really cool to have them two back. You know, this really felt like, you know, season 1 flashback callbacks. That's kind of what this was. I was half expecting Slade to show up at some point, but obviously they haven't announced Slade. There is a possibility that Slade may not even be in this season, but you know, it kind of felt like, you know, when he says, you know, all the characters who are back in this episode are ones from who were there from the beginning, I thought, well, you could have Slade here, there is a chance. But no, Edward Fires, Billy Wintergreen, great choices. And of course, like, the main standout one was Byron Mann returning as Yao Fei. I love Byron Mann. Byron Mann, I think, is such a great actor, and he's such a great talent as well. I really love him. My love for him has grew even more in 2019 thanks to the Netflix show Wu Assassins. If you've been watching my movie channel, you'll know I went on about that show quite a lot this year. So to have Byron Mann return to Arrow is great. We haven't seen him since season 5. He had a brief cameo in season 5. Just a really nice cameo to have him back here. And, you know, Yao Fei is kind of the original OG mentor for Oliver. To bring him back, just great. He had so many great moments with Oliver. You know, their chemistry is so unique in comparison to most of the other characters on the show. You've got to have Yao Fei back for this final season. Yao Fei is the one who is responsible for giving Oliver the idea of the Green Arrow, really, you know, at least aesthetically. So to have him here, again, felt very, very appropriate. Now, a character I was very pleased to see return in this episode was Colton Haynes as Roy Harper. Of course, we did have Roy in episode 5, that was his official return, but I didn't actually know he was in this episode until I saw it. I just assumed he wasn't, because he wasn't in any of the promo photos or anything. But here he was, and we got a big moment for Roy, which really calls back to the comics, which is that we actually see Roy lose his arm. This was really great, because this is such a big moment for Roy in the comics. If you don't know, in the comics, Roy actually gets his arm chopped off by Prometheus. So here we get our own version of that, where after the plane crash, he travels on a plane, obviously, to get to Lian, the plane crashes, and he gets his arm trapped under debris, and the only way they can get out in time before the gas lights and, you know, basically he explodes, is to amputate, and Connor has to rip his arm off. And this was really, really great, because again, I think that giving Roy that kind of last element from the comics of him losing his arm is just something that really just calls back to such a great moment from the comics of Prometheus chopping off Roy Harper's arm, and it just adds a certain level of more badass to his character. I think that, you know, Colton Haynes did a really great job with this scene. Like, he really sold the pain of it, And I think that his scene following it with David Ramsey was just fantastic. Like the way them two were able to just talk about it, and Roy was talking about sacrifices and things like that, actually brought a tear to my eye. I think it was a really good scene, and I think that, you know, Roy, he is one of my favorite characters. I love him, and to see him kind of go and really take up that comic storyline of losing his arm, it's cool. I mean, I wonder if they're going to do anything. Like, I wonder if we'll see him in Crisis fighting with, like, a robot arm or something. That could be something they could do. It would be really cool. But we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But I loved everything they did with Roy in this episode. And for me, honestly, I think that this was, like, the perfect way to kind of end off his character in a way for this final season, was to give him that awesome comic arc. The kids were also a highlight for me this week, which I know is quite an interesting thing to say. For me, particularly, I've got to mention Kat McNamara. I think that Mia was actually really good in this episode. I think this is by far Mia's best episode of the series. I think that she was actually quite the standout here. You know, I've not been too positive on Mia this season. I wasn't last season either. I've not been too big of a fan of the character. I actually really started to come around to her in this episode. I think that the way Mia was handled was particularly well done, because there was a particular moment where they really could have let Mia go off the rails here, and they could have had her, you know, completely disobey Oliver's commands and ignore William by just going after Oliver. But then she doesn't. She actually doesn't do that, and she actually sits back and listens to what people have to say and trusts in William, in what he says, in that, you know, he's going to be fine, he's cheated death a million times, and what Diggle says is that, you know, nobody knows Lian Yu better than Oliver. And she actually listens to that and trusts within those people, and when Oliver returns, he's absolutely fine. And it made Mia actually seem like she's actually had some development here, actually had a bit of an arc here. And I really appreciated that, because again, I've really wanted to like Mia. Again, Mia is going to be the main character of this spin-off, and I want to watch this spin-off, and I want to be behind the character. And I've been struggled to be doing that this season, but in this episode, I really got behind Mia, and I actually really liked her in this episode. I thought this was a really great episode for her, and her scene with Steven at the end, which I'll talk about in a little bit, was great. I think Kat did a great job, and also Ben Lewis as well as William. Another great scene with him and Stephen Amell here, just like we got in episode 4. Really great stuff. Again, I've been a big fan of Ben Lewis. I've liked him in this series. I mean, William as a character has been, you know, just fine, but I think that Ben has done a really good job portraying him. And again, his scene with Steven here, absolutely fantastic. I really liked it. And I think the kids, again, overall, they were both stellar, and their scenes with their dad were both emotionally warranted and also just a really great scene to watch in general. Now, speaking of emotion, I've got to talk about this scene. Right at the very end of the episode, we have a conversation between Oliver and Diggle. This scene made me bawl with tears. This might be the most I've ever cried at the show. And I've cried at Arrow quite a few times. You know, especially like Quentin's death in season 6 was a huge one for me. I really lost it with that one. But I actually feel like this may have been the most I've ever cried at the show. The brotherly bond between our two leads will never be broken, and to see that solidified in the scene was beautiful to watch. I love the fact that, again, this is almost like a series finale. Seeing Oliver and Diggle, who have been there together from day one, working together side by side, and have really become brothers, not by blood, but by choice. And to see them really just connect in that way, and to see Oliver and Diggle like thanking each other for everything they've done for each other over the years, and, you know, for the bond that they've built together and everything they've done for one another, it really made me tear up. Like, because it almost felt like Oliver was saying goodbye to Diggle in this scene, especially because obviously likelihood is in the next episode of Arrow, Oliver, or at least, you know, in the next few episodes of the Arrowverse in general, you know, with Crisis, he's going to die. So, or at least he's going to go somewhere. So, you know, it's likely that this was our goodbye scene for Diggle, and it was really emotional. Like, again, Diggle is a character who, he's the heart of the show. He's the one that everyone gravitates towards. So this scene, they really had to nail it, and they had to nail the emotion, and they absolutely did. The writing was great here, and Stephen and David absolutely solid. Of course, their chemistry is unmatched, and it's just seeing them. Again, I completely lost it. I burst into tears. I'm worried to watch this episode again because I know the exact same thing will happen. But this was absolutely beautiful. For me, this was definitely the standout scene of the episode. I loved it. And right at the very end of the episode, after Lila had disappeared, she actually returns in front of Oliver and Mia. Now, I have to say, again, going back to Mia, her scene with Oliver here was really great. I really liked the fact that they had this conversation where Mia was, you know, truly thanking Oliver, you know, being, you know, thank you for letting me be a part of your journey and things like that. And this whole scene was basically spin-off setup, you know, Oliver saying, you know, there's no more stories of the Green Arrow left to tell, but you you know, I'm sure you'll create your own stories and stuff like that. But it was a really emotional scene, and again, it felt like Mia had truly accepted the fact that what Oliver did was right, and, you know, the decision that he made to leave Mia and William to go and save the multiverse was the right decision, and she came to terms with that. She had accepted that and realized that yes, that was the right choice. Yeah, maybe she may not fully accept it. You know, it's something that, you know, she's going to grow up without her dad regardless, but she's realized that there's nothing she can really do to change that. And I think that that was a really nice scene that they shared, a really nice bond that they had built by this point in the season, and I really liked that. Again, Mia just massively upping my expectations in this episode. This was by far her best episode, and this scene was great. And I think that it really solidified Mia as a much better character in my books than she has been so far on the show. So after this scene, we do have Lila appear in front of them after disappearing, and she is now Harbinger. She actually is in the Harbinger costume, and she literally says, "The crisis has begun," and you look out at the horizon and you just see the red skies, the infamous red skies. So obviously this is just telling us the crisis begins. You know, Crisis is next week, so, you know, all of next week we're going to have Supergirl, Batwoman, and The Flash all doing Crisis, and the crisis has begun. Obviously, Flash does end in a very similar way as well, which is awesome. They kind of are tied in together in that way, so we're going to go straight into the crossover together. But I really like this ending. Again, it just sets up the crossover really well, and I think that it was just a really great ending, especially for Lila, who's Lila has had such an interesting story this season. Like, she's been one of the most interesting characters, so to see her just kind of finally show up as Harbinger to deliver the news that the crisis has begun, it gave me tingles. Overall, I loved this episode, and it was a perfect send-off for the traditional episodes of the show. It was appropriate, it was emotional, it was hard-hitting, and I loved every single second of it. For me, this episode is the second best of the season. It's hard to top the first episode, really, because it was just so special and so unique and so fun to watch with all the characters and stuff like that. But this was definitely my second favorite of the episode of the season, which is funny because I said that last week with episode 6. But yeah, episode 7 topped episode 6. It's just fantastic. Again, it felt so appropriate to go back to Lian Yu. The way that this episode was able to bring me around on Mia is a big, big statement. And also, I think that the goodbye scene between Oliver and Diggle will be something that I will leave this season thinking about. Like, that scene will stick with me among, like, you know, standout scenes from the show as a whole. That scene will stick with me. And of course, bringing back Yao Fei. Love Yao Fei. This is just such a great send-off, and I loved it. Again, as like the final traditional episode, I don't think you could have gone better than this, and I think James Bamford, obviously getting him to direct it, perfect choice. It was just a fantastic episode, and for me, I absolutely adored it. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like. It'll help me out a lot. And share this video with anyone and everyone you know who loves DC TV and get them to join the community. And as always, guys, please subscribe for your latest content on Supergirl, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Arrow, and Batwoman, and Black Lightning, and everything else in between. And I hope to see you guys again next time.